The bustling city street was alive with the usual chaos: honking cars, hurried footsteps, and muffled conversations. Amid it all, a homeless man sat quietly on the sidewalk, his small cup jingling with a few coins. He wasn't bothering anyone, just sitting there with a hopeful smile. Then out of nowhere, a woman stormed over, her voice sharp and cutting. "You think this is the way to live?" she sneered, snatching the cup from his hands. The man's expression turned to shock as she brazenly walked away with his money. What she didn't realize was that someone was watching, someone who wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. A police general, sitting nearby in his parked car, had seen the entire encounter. He stepped out, his presence commanding, and followed her. What happens next will leave you speechless, as this moment spirals into an unexpected twist of justice and humanity. As the woman marched down the street, the jingling of stolen coins echoed in the air, a stark contrast to the silence of the man she left behind. The homeless man sat frozen, his eyes clouded with disbelief and sadness. He wasn't used to kindness, but outright cruelty like this. It cut deep. Passers-by glanced his way but kept moving, either too busy or too uncomfortable to intervene. Meanwhile, the police general kept his eyes locked on the woman. She moved with an air of entitlement, completely unaware that her actions were being closely watched. He wasn't just any officer. Years of service had sharpened his instincts, and something about this situation didn't sit right. Was this just a moment of callousness, or was there a deeper motive behind her actions? As he followed her at a distance, questions swirled in his mind, and he knew this wasn't over. The woman stopped outside a cafe, casually dropping the coins into her purse without a second thought. She glanced around, as if daring someone to challenge her, but the street remained indifferent. Inside the cafe, she ordered an expensive coffee, her demeanor calm, almost smug. The police general watched from across the street, his sharp eyes catching every detail. He wasn't ready to confront her yet. He wanted to understand the full picture. Back on the sidewalk, the homeless man quietly began gathering his few belongings. His hands trembled slightly, but his face held no anger, just a weary resignation. People like her weren't new to him. Still, something about today felt heavier, like a weight he couldn't shake. The general's focus shifted when he saw another woman approach the homeless man, crouching down to speak with him. Her soft voice carried concern, and he noticed the man's posture change slightly. Hope, perhaps. This wasn't just a random event anymore. Something deeper was unfolding, and the general knew he had to tread carefully to uncover the truth. The homeless man looked up at the kind woman, her gentle smile like a light cutting through the heavy clouds of his day. She handed him a small bag of food and a bottle of water, her actions simple but sincere. For a moment he hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust her kindness. Finally, he accepted, murmuring a soft thank you. The scene caught the general's attention. Two strangers, both in stark contrast to the woman who had just robbed him, now connected in an act of humanity. Meanwhile, the woman who had taken the money stepped out of the cafe, her coffee in hand. She paused, noticing the interaction across the street, her expression unreadable. The general noted the flicker of something, guilt perhaps. But it vanished as quickly as it came. She turned away and began walking, unaware that the general was now trailing her more closely. As she turned a corner, the woman slowed her pace, reaching into her purse. The general's heart quickened as he watched her pull something out, a folded piece of paper. She studied it intently before tucking it away and continuing on. What was she planning? With each step, the stakes felt higher, and the general knew the moment of confrontation was drawing closer. The general quickened his pace, sensing the moment to act was near. The woman stopped in front of a small office building and glanced around before slipping inside. The general followed, careful to stay out of sight. Inside, he found her at the reception desk, handing over the folded paper. The receptionist gave her a curious look before taking it and disappearing into a back room. The general waited, his mind racing. What could she be up to? Minutes later, the receptionist returned with an envelope, which the woman quickly pocketed. She turned to leave, but the general stepped forward, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said firmly. Her eyes widened as she recognized him, and for the first time, her confidence faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice shaky. But the general gestured for the receptionist, who handed him the envelope. Inside was a donation receipt for a local charity, a large sum, much more than she had stolen from the homeless man. "I didn't mean any harm," she finally admitted. "I wanted to teach him something, but then I couldn't keep the money. I thought this might help." The general's stern expression softened. "It's not your place to teach anyone a lesson," he said, "but you did the right thing in the end." He escorted her outside, where the homeless man still sat, finishing the meal the kind stranger had given him. The woman hesitated before approaching him, her earlier bravado replaced with quiet humility. "I'm sorry," she said, placing the remaining money into his hands. The man looked at her, surprised, then nodded silently. As the woman walked away, the general couldn't help but wonder if this moment might truly change her. Justice in this case had taken an unexpected path, one that left everyone with something to think about. As the woman disappeared into the crowd, the homeless man sat quietly, his weathered hands clutching the money. He looked up at the general, who gave him a small nod, as if to say everything was going to be okay. The man smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope breaking through the hardships he carried every day. The general stayed for a moment longer, watching as the man carefully tucked the money away, his posture a little straighter now. Across the street, the kind woman who had given him food lingered, her eyes meeting the general's. They exchanged a silent understanding. Sometimes small acts of compassion could ripple into something much larger. As the city buzzed on, oblivious to what had just unfolded, the general walked away with a renewed belief in the power of choices. In the end, justice wasn't just about laws. It was about humanity, second chances, and doing what's right.